Oh, thank you, Rod. Thank you, Sir Rod, for that. Hello, everyone. I am Larry Locken, Rocken Larry Locken, I like to call myself, and friends like to call me. I'm going to talk a little bit about my UFO contacts that I've had for years. I've done shows on it before. I usually like to interview people about the subject, and it's been a long time. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the orbs as well too, and what orbs are, the different definitions of them, what some of them are. The variety of things that they could be, that they are. But I'm going to start by talking about my contacts, how they started. So it was December 28th, 2010. My kids were at their mom's over the holidays. It was just me and my girlfriend there, and her mom was in town. So her mom came over and stayed, and we were going to watch a movie, and then we were going to play some Monopoly till late into the night. Well, about 8:30 that night, now it was actually about 7:45 it started kicking in, but I started to get a really bad migraine, and I took all kinds of shit for it, everything you could imagine, even some Imitrex. Didn't get rid of it, and finally I had to go to bed. It was, I was going to stay up really late, but it was like 9:15, 9:30. I went ahead and went to bed. I couldn't. There was no getting rid of this son of a bitch. So I went and laid down, and typically what I had been doing, this was, in 2010, I had been doing this since I was about 4 years old in 1979. I would go to bed to political talk radio from a station out of San Francisco at the time, which was 500 miles south on the coast. I was really heavily into politics. And the station was out for the night. Now, this would happen maybe twice a year. This would happen with the station. They would close it down for repairs, so they wouldn't be on the air for a night. Well, I was screwing around with the dial. I thought, okay, well, I'll find something else to listen to. And I tuned in. I'm sure it was probably Coast to Coast AM. George Norrie was not hosting it, that I remember. It was real scratchy, and I tuned it in. And, well, they were talking about that situation in the late 40s where the extraterrestrials sold our government some weapons, some weaponry, and how that went down, that they went with the Greys. And they were talking about two other groups that had came and tried to pitch the idea to help humanity, but one of them was a Nordic-looking clan, they said, and one of them was the Pleiadians. I'd never heard that word before, ever, Pleiadians. And they said that our governments didn't want to have anything to do with it. The Russians said no go. We said no go because they wanted everybody to freeze their nuclear weapons. Well, they didn't want that. The Greys, on the other hand, were perfectly willing to help with a little bit of, that kind of weaponry, and as long as, they could abduct people. Now, whether or not that story is true or not is not really my point. My point being was I heard that word Pleiadians, and it was the strangest thing because I thought, I didn't think it was an interesting word to hear, but I didn't think it was not an interesting word to hear. I couldn't, for the first time in my life, I couldn't make of what I was making of something. Right, and it wasn't about that whole show was not about the Pleiadians at all. It was just they were mentioned in that one part of it. It was just one little segment of it. So, yeah, so that was that. So the next day, I started having all these synchronicities start happening. I started to, it took till probably that next evening to where I was wanting to look up the Pleiadians. Who are they? What are they? What do they do? What is it about them? And I started listening to all kinds of channelings. The first channeling I got a hold of was this one that was talking about the 1980s being the start of a corporate control. And I'd always said this since I was a little kid. I had said exactly what this channel had said, and nobody else had said it. It was just it was jarring. It was jaw-dropping, actually. The funny thing is I couldn't get back to it at all. I couldn't get back to it. And I went to other channelings and I couldn't find this thing. I looked all over my hard drive and it didn't even show that I had been to this place on YouTube. I even had a friend of mine come out the next day after he got off work. He was an IT guy, to help me look all over my computer. I'm like, where the hell is this thing? and we couldn't find it. And I never found that channeling again. It was really strange. It was like it was really meant for me. So that night, I went to bed, probably about 1:30. Put something in my ear to listen to. I was just about ready to doze off. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I went up to go to the bathroom. Or I got up to go to the bathroom real quick. And outside of my bedroom window, in the distance, about 1 kilometer, 3/4 of a mile or so, was the Pacific Ocean over these trees. And I lived high up, kind of on a ridge at the time. And so I went to the bathroom, and keep in mind, I hadn't been drinking or anything that night. I really hadn't even taken any sleeping meds that night. I was just kind of starting to go to sleep, and I had to get up and go pee. Well, for some reason, on my way back to bed, I decided to peek through the blinds. Well, I did, and then over in the distance over the ocean, this light blinked green, it blinked red, it blinked silver. And then all of a sudden, man, it shot up straight across over probably, 100 feet from me outside of my house. 100 feet, and probably no more than 150 feet up into the air. But this thing stretched out this thing stretched out probably close to between 1/8 and 1/4 of a mile long. And it was green at one end, and it was red at the other end, lit up. And then right straight in the middle, it was like silver and gold lights. Okay? And this thing, my eyes feasted upon it. It was huge. And it lasted I remember counting in my head about 5 seconds, which is quite a while. And then all of a sudden, it cloaked like on Star Trek. It just cloaked. It was over these cranberry bogs. Keep in mind, right in the middle of this place where I lived was the world's largest organic cranberry bogs in the world. For like 20 years straight, except for a couple of those years when it finished second to some place in South America. But other than that, it was first and second, most of the time first, okay? So this thing stretched out clear over these bogs. And then it just cloaked, and I could see like the remnants, the outline of the ship, and then it just kind of faded away, but it cloaked like an episode of Star Trek. Okay. So the very next day, we're getting to around New Year's Eve here. Yeah, we're getting about New Year's Day, the 2011. It was a pretty typical normal day. I went to bed, though, earlier than, my girlfriend did. She was out doing something, and we're watching something. I decided to go to bed and listen to something, and I had my headphones in my ear, and I didn't have them plugged into anything yet. I just had them dangling in my ear, hanging around. And all of a sudden, I hear a voice. I hear an actual voice go, like a friend go, "Hey," or go just real calmly. It wasn't like, "Hey," it was like, "Hey." And I'm like, what the fuck? And I looked around, and I thought it was weird, and I took the headphones off my ears real quick, and I was like, okay, and I just shook my head a little bit, and I put them back in my ear, and a few seconds went by, and I hear the same fucking voice go, "Hey, what are you doing?" like a friend would. And I took them off my ear, and I threw these things across the room. And my girlfriend came in and said, "What was that noise?" And I said, "Oh, I dropped something. Or I made up some stupid, excuse, right?" And so I went and grabbed them, composed myself, and then all of a sudden I started getting a telepathic communication from them, and they said they were sorry about that. They're really not supposed to do it like that anyway, contact you by a voice, actual voice, because they don't want people to think they're having voices in their head. But so it was a ship. They explained to me that they were a fifth dimensional ship from the Pleiades. They were called the Athabachan or some shit like that. The first year is kind of hazy to me. Okay, and we'll get into that. The orbs don't come along. Till just a couple weeks short of a year of me having contact. So this ship, I talked to them a lot, had a lot of two-way communications with them telepathically, but I never saw what the inhabitants inside of it looked like ever. Okay, they were there for about 6 months with me constantly. Then, in the 6 months before the orbs came, these little plasma-like guys came, and they looked like, and they were the exact same as this collective out of the sixth dimension that, a fairly well-known couple that channels the Pleiadians, Pia Colin Colin Baird Smith and Pia Orlean. They're a couple from Ashland, Oregon. I think they live out of the Redwoods sometimes too. That's only a few hours or a couple hours south of me. They channeled a group called Larkma, and I'm pretty sure now that looking back on it, that's who that was. And I thought so maybe at that time too, because I had started during that time to listen to other Pleiadian channelers, and Larkma was one of them. Okay, so these guys were plasma-like, and like really funny little smiley-looking guys. They look like characters, Beetle characters off of Yellow Submarine, or little Nikola Tesla-looking face guys. The way that what really did it for me, that wasn't that seeing that ship, and it wasn't all the contact I'd had with them telepathically, but what did it for me that I knew it was completely legit was right after they had came around, those plasma guys, right after they came around, my girlfriend we were separating completely because I had an awakening. She thought it was weird. I was into crystals all of a sudden and shit, and I suppose it was, and talking about extraterrestrials and the Pleiadians and listening to all kinds of fucking channelings on YouTube that were big back then, whether it was Magenta Pixie, whoever was, doing it back then, Amana Merkaba, different characters like Seleucia from Sirius. Mira was still around back then, though. Mira was around, that entity, and quite a few others. But yeah, so we were separated. She moved out. Okay, so but she was still coming over sometimes and staying the night with me and things like that. One of them things. And the last night that we ever had spent together, she came over and she was tired. We went to bed early and she was asleep and I was just laying there. We were laying next, with each other, and I was just laying there listening to music in the background and just kind of spacing off on the lava lamp and thinking about shit. And these plasma beings started flying all around. They helped themselves in and were flying around and smiling at me. And I was just, nothing else to do. I was just watching them. And and then I got to watching them for about 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes. And I said, you know what? I said, this is a bunch of bullshit. Am I going crazy or what? This whole thing. I said, I'll tell you what. If you guys are really real, I'll tell you what. Go behind. My girlfriend, I was holding her while she was sleeping. I said, why don't you have her jump like somebody does when they're having a dream and they think they're falling, but they catch themselves. I said, why don't you have her do that? If you're real, have her do that real quick. And I'd never seen her do that in her sleep ever. And 3 seconds later, she jumped like crazy. And the first words out of my mouth were, oh, fuck, what a bunch of bullshit. I said, really, if that's the case, why don't you do it again then? A couple seconds went by, guess what? She jumped. They went around her and she jumped. And I said, okay. At that point, my tune changed real quick. I said, look, this is really strange, all of this, but I said, look, I won't ask you to do any kind of shit like this ever again, and I don't want to sit here and bother somebody while they're trying to sleep like that. That's not me, but it's worth my sanity to know. Having her jump like she's having a fall, like in a dream, a couple times is worth me knowing. If that's what it takes. I said, why don't you do that? Would you do that to her a third time? And I would never ask again, just for my sanity. About 5 seconds went by, nothing happened, 6 seconds. And then all of a sudden, I was about ready to say something, and all of a sudden she jumped. 3 straight times like that, you know what I mean? And they were very visually around me. I could see that. So, the coincidence would be crazier than the reality. But, so that happened, okay? So they were around, a few more months, and then it was so weird because I went to town one day. And then I came home, and these orbs were there. These orbs that were rainbow colored were there, right? And I'm like, okay, what happened to the plasma guys? I said, well, then they told me that they were from these orbs, or from the 7th dimension. The plasma was from the 6th. I said, oh, okay. So that started about an 8-year, that started probably a good 7.5-year era run where they were like around me all the time, where they're visible around me all the time, like in light. People could even see them that would be over there at night and shit. Yeah, so you know, they would just hang out and smile, and I would talk to them at first. Mostly what my conversations revolved around them with was galactic history, because I was really getting into how it all went down, and things like that, and trying to be a sponge and absorb as much as I could. The only stupid question that I ever asked them was, I did ask the Rainbow One. It was a fleet of these guys were a military fleet from the Pleiades, the ones I channeled. They were a military fleet of ships. They had different colored orbs, and then they had the captain, which was a rainbow colored orb, a swirl of all the other ones together. Okay, and then the others were just solid colors, but they were a military fleet from Pleiades with mostly Pleiadian souls on there serving, with a few Lyrans, a couple Lyrans, a couple Syrians, and like an Arcturian per ship, and then, you know, a few dozen Pleiadians on each one. I asked the one, I said, well, who is going to win this was a couple months after they'd been there, and I said to them, I said, well, the Super Bowl, or I said, our football season starts here in several months that we have here on this. You guys probably know anything about it. I said, who's going to win the Super Bowl this next year? I said, do you guys know anything about that? And I figured they would say either no, they didn't, or that they, you know, don't get into doing that kind of, or that they, you know, it's like predicting the lottery. They can't do that. Well, what they told me is that the first thing out of this dude's mouth telepathically, the Rainbow Orb, was every single team was going to win. That they were aware of it, and every single team was going to win the Super Bowl. And my jaw dropped, and I'm like, huh? That's exactly what I said. I said, huh? And they said, yes, because we exist in endless parallel realities. So in some parallel reality, each team's going to win the Super Bowl. And then this orb gave me a big-ass grin after he said that. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I'm like, thanks. Yeah, and they said, and we can't tell you what parallel reality you're in because you change that with every move that you make. So there's these endless parallel realities. They can give you, now what they're good at is they can give you the innate possibilities on what can happen in, you know, in the future. But anybody can really do that if you think things through logically, right? I mean, you can come up with a fucking list of what's possibly going to happen to anything. Now, some of it you might not want to hear because you don't like one of the options, right? But yeah, so there's not really a lot of reason once you get the basics down to have constant conversations with them, unless they, you know, you're channeling through them, which I do about 30 different collectives here and there. But now it's to the point where I just let them come in and come through, and I don't have a conversation with them so much anymore because there's really nothing I want to know from them. But I will ask them questions if people want to know, but people just don't ever ask. If people have a particular question that's, you know, within reason, that sounds halfway intelligent to ask them, I totally would get an answer, I'm sure, at some point. But these extraterrestrials, some of them were part of my collective coming in here, you know, part of soul family, your collective family. That's not all of them, though. Some of them, especially these ones that I've been contacting just the last year, the Pleiadian girls, they tuned into my frequency. Because our bodies are like a radio station. We're a super high wattage radio station. And, you know, beings from all over the cosmos that are way more ascended than we are, of course, they tune into us like a radio station. That's why they say watch your thoughts, because you broadcast, you're powerful in your broadcast, and you broadcast that shit out, right? And so people pick up on it from all over the cosmos. So they did. Come to find out, they have known about me since I was a little boy in the late 70s here. But then they found out I had a collective, and that I was with. I had been from there, and all this. They found out exactly who I was, and so they decided to just kind of watch from afar and leave me alone up until this last year, when they started to come into my life one by one. And there's 9 of them. I don't channel them together. They're not a collective together. They are a collective, but I channel them individually. And the first one I ever dealt with was the one and only time out of probably close to 600 channelings I've had with extraterrestrials that I've ever had one in a dream. Seriously, the only one I've ever consciously had. I mean, I'm sure I've had plenty of dreams. We all do like that. We all astral travel all night long. It's just that a lot of us don't remember it. So as far as being conscious of it, I've only had one contact with them in a dream, and it was this pink collective of human beings. Her name was Fusacia. She was one of the Pleiadian girls, the first one I met. And then it went on down the list. And then it took me, it was about 2 or 3 in before I knew that they were even had anything to do with each other. I mean, of course, all these collectives know each other from the cosmos, most of them, but I didn't think of it as they had any other kind of affiliation together, but they did. They all went to college together in what would be like our time frame. It would have been like the 1970s. They don't really go by time. They use a small barometer for historical purposes, but they don't really. That's just kind of when they have it traced to, and we figured that out, that it was probably then too, because of a conversation we were having, and they were discussing with me things that they had tuned in from Earth. They had a powerful radio station and some gadget that they tuned all over the cosmos to pick up other humans, and shit that they were picking up from Earth when they were in college. And I deducted to them that it was probably about the late 70s, our time frame. So yeah, well, and that would stand to reason too. I mean, that was that's what the time that I was really little, and when they had first ran into me. So, but the orbs, I'll get right into them. There's different sorts of orbs. They're either usually star beings, like humans, like us, but from other star nations, right, that morph down into an orb because they can't manifest into a full body here because of the density, or they're from the angelic realms. The angelic realm orbs are a lot, how do I say that? They're kind of smoother. They don't have as much, they don't have as many dots and stuff on them. Those dots are different beings usually, or they're different places on that. Some of these orbs, you have to understand, are floating cities. Okay, there's cities, like neighborhoods on these things, right? And then some of these things are just like floating Winnebagos for retired angels. So, there's anywhere from 2 to 6 on one orb, big orb, and that's it. And they're a lot more smoother looking. The orbs that are from when I say lower dimensions, I'm talking no lower than, probably the 7th dimension. Higher 60 maybe, but 7th dimensional orbs that are from the star nations. Usually those are, military or peacekeeping fleets. Right, and then when you start getting up into the higher dimensions, past, like in the higher dimensions of Arcturus itself, you start getting these things that look like, man, I don't know how to describe them if you've ever seen them before. There's tons of pictures of them out now. I mean, if you're into this kind of thing and you haven't seen a picture of them yet, you probably have the same thing Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles had. But they look like kind of the cross between a blue vase and like I don't know how else to describe it, but like a blue bong. They come out of the sky. They start out, they come through a portal through the sun, and then they come through, sometimes then you'll see them come through a cloud, and then they will slowly descend down into Earth and touch down. And then what'll happen is the being that was in there, or the crew that was in one of those, will get out, and they can manifest into human-looking beings on planet Earth. It's true. And so, but they're not only just blue. I need to preface that. You're seeing more green ones now, and purple ones too, that are a green and a violet color. And I knew that was coming too, because those two colors all these colors play a big role in what's coming up in their own way, with the blue, the green, the purple, pink, yellow, right? But they look like a cross between a vase and a bong. I've seen some that look like maybe they might be like a thick candle holder or something, but no, they really do. That's the only way I could really describe one, is they look like somebody, didn't know whether they wanted to make a vase or a vase or a bong with it. And that's just, to me, what I would say they look like. And those are usually from about, 13th density or higher. Now the light that's around these, the light rays that come in with these particular ones are from 12th dimension of Arcturus. The Arcturian translucent color realms, one of the collectives I channel, is like that. But then the crystal blue angels of the 13th dimension, they come down in those blue vases. But they can also too, here's another thing, they can also look like a blue or a green steering wheel coming down too. It can also look like that. So those are orbs from Arcturus, and I think the Andromedans too. But Andromedans and Arcturians are the same. They're just the only difference between them is that one's in Andromeda and one's in Arcturus. It's the same. They're the same thing. But we'll get into that another time. But yeah, same exact race really. The higher dimensions, but the orbs. So sometimes they can be an individual person in one, and sometimes they can be a few, and then sometimes there are a whole fleet of them, or not a fleet, but a whole crew of them in one, and then a fleet of them, like the military ones that I told you I channeled from Pleiades. Right? They were like, a ship out at sea with a ton of people serving on it, versus just a little small team, or a couple people, or one that retired angels are driving around like a Winnebago in the cosmos. Now, some of these other people that are on these orbs, a lot of times people that are really spiritual people, and they may never have even let on a day in their life that they're spiritual, okay? It just, you could tell they were really good people. And they come back for some time in those first 2 years when they're gone, they come back, maybe on a semi-regular basis and make themselves known somehow to a loved one. Right? Now, they spend a little bit of time on the orbs, right, before going to where they're going to go. Now, it's also my understanding, too, that from a lot of these star nations and angelic realms, souls that are going to incarnate back into Earth, for some time now, they have the option of spending 2 years on an orb ship. What's like the equivalent of 2 years in no time, in our illusionary time, but going around and seeing where they may want to incarnate to here, what kind of a family they may want to incarnate to, kind of whittle it down, and see, right, have their handful or so of choices where they would want to be born at, and then once they get that figured out, get a set number of families to have their first, second, third, fourth, option like that, right? That's kind of how a starseed comes in here. Light workers, they're same kind of thing, but they already know exactly who their parent's going to be, exactly. Starseed, it's within, a few different options, right? And you're part of that collective that's a seed, and some of that seed goes here, some of it goes there, and those are your soul fragments that are on the planet. And then, of course, you have your collective in space that came in with you and is part of your team. But you also have other star beings that can tune into your frequency and find you if you're, open to such a thing. So it's, I don't know how to tell anybody to have contact with them. I've been asked countless times over the years, and the only thing I can tell people is I don't know, because it happened. It just happened to me all the time, and they won't, they keep coming and keep coming. I don't know. I obviously signed up for it before I came here or something like that. I sure as hell didn't in this reality, though. I mean, I didn't ask. I was into politics. I was just an average man. I lived an average life. I worked from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I paid the price, as the song said. I just want to be left alone in my average home in the Twilight Zone. Yeah. But I didn't, I was into politics. I really worked in it. I really didn't ask for these fuckers to come into my life. Affectionately, I said, I didn't ask for these motherfuckers to come into my life. They just did. Oh, granted, I'm sure that beforehand I did, of course. But I wasn't aware of it. You know what I mean? I wasn't looking to have it happen at all. In fact, it was one of them subjects I was into, but I wasn't. It was weird. I was into it, but I wasn't. It was there. For some reason, there was no reason I heard of the word Pleiadians until it was about ready to happen. And there's no rhyme or reason why I wouldn't have at least heard of their name. I'd listened to Coast off and on for years. I mean, back when Art Bell did it in the 90s, sometimes I'd get bored of the political talk I listened to every night, and I'd tune in to see what the hell he had on. didn't think a lot of it then. I would listen to it, but yeah, it was what it was, right? It was a hell of a lot better than it is now, I'll tell you that. I mean, there was a lot less commercials, and Art Bell was a lot more entertaining than George Norrie. But that being said, yeah, so I don't know. I wouldn't know how to put the intention out there. I would think it would be easier now than ever because they're all around. I mean, if you really want to have contact with them and you haven't yet, I don't know how that's even possible. Unless you're thinking it's something that it's not. But they're all over the place, And yeah, I know. And granted, it's easy for me to say because it didn't take any work for me to have it happen, right? So, yeah, I don't know how to. I mean, I've tried to give some of my collectives away, and they, hey, I channel too many of them. You want to take one off my hands? Yeah. But, and by the way, they're not exclusive to one person, these entities. I don't like calling them entities, but what are these star beings, these humans from other places, these spirits that are, if they're not human anymore, it's because they're thousands and millions of years more advanced to us, that they're just kind of a liquid molecule that can, a plasma molecule that can morph into nothing. It can, interdimensionally weave through anything, right? But the consciousness at one point was, hominoid like ours. Some of them not exactly, but because there's all kinds of humans out there. There's there's feline humans, cat humans, or cat dog. Obviously, if there's feline, there's cat. There's canine, eagleoids, reptoids, rolloids. Rolloids, every kind you can imagine. Different humans that look like us that are different colors of the rainbow, mixed colors of the rainbow. I mean, they're out there, though. It's teeming with life out there. There's probably 1 trillion times infinity Earth planets just in our backyard. So, yeah, it's really weird, though. But then the synchronicity's kicking in with other people that you meet online. And it's weird because I kept trying to find starseed groups on Facebook because that's all we had back then. TikTok, nothing existed. Twitter was even just in its infancy, and it was just kind of a place where people, middle-aged dudes, traded one-line insults or one-line witty comments thinking they were fucking smart or whatever. That's kind of what it was. And that was good. It gave them something to, get all excited about. But you couldn't even do Facebook Live back then. But there was none of this other shit existed. I mean, TikTok, hip hop, Bit Bop, Instagram, Telegram, buy a gram, go tell Gram to go get me a gram before I go on air. WhatsApp, which is a bunch of crap. Pinterest, which I have very little interest, some disinterest, but or some interest, but mostly disinterest in Pinterest. Purple sky, tie-dyed sky, rainy sky, gray skies are gonna clear up. Put on a happy face, blue sky. What else? Let's see. Let's see. I need my meds. I should probably go to bed. I don't need any more street cred, but thank God I've got threads. My friend Nate, he really loves Lemonade, so he can go on there and master his checkmate because he goes on there to get good at chess. But there's just so many of them. Twitch, Tweak, Twirl, Twerk, X. But anyway, there was only YouTube to do shows through back then, if you were somebody like me, and put it on Facebook afterward, and I think we could post it to Twitter back then. I'm not really sure. MySpace was already kind of faded away doing what it went on to do. So things were a lot different back then. But what I was going to say was I tried to find groups on Facebook that were lightworker, starseed oriented. I started doing this about, really, the end of January of 2011 was the first time I took a look and tried to find some. Nothing. It turns out they were all there, but nothing. Another 6 months went by. I tried it again. Then I tried it again in early 2012, later 2012. So it wasn't until the day after Thanksgiving of 2013 where I had tried it like 5 times over, by that time, almost 3-year period, and couldn't find any of them. Nothing. Pleiadian, starseeds, Arcturian, not a goddamn thing. Right? But all of a sudden, one day right after Thanksgiving in 2013, I went on, bam, they were all there. And people that I had been listened to for a few years were in these groups too. That I had heard be interviewed on different shows on YouTube, you know, around N5D, like Greg Prescott's big network, which I ended up doing a show on for a while on there too. And, you know, and I really looked up that dude because I'd been listening to him for years before I met him, right? And that was the case, but I couldn't find any of these groups till then. It was really strange, and I had checked 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, it's like 6 times over that 2.5-year period. Like, there were 6 different times I went on a real random look for these fuckers, and there was nothing. Isn't that weird? Piped in Starseed, all that shit, but they were there. But they weren't there until, you know, when I guess when it was time to be ready to be there. But that was really odd, too. I thought that was kind of bizarre. These orbs are not... The only creepy orb that I've ever seen before, it was a black orb with white, grayish soot to it, and it was above a friend of mine who was staying with me for a week or so back in, when the fuck was it? It would have been like 2015 or 16. Anyway, my orbs were over, and I looked at him sitting at the table in this one room, and he was just totally wrecked, and he was fucked up. He was hammered and wasted and all that good stuff. And this really creepy looking orb was right above his head that looked like that. And I'm like, oh my God. And he was laughing really weird. And I'm like, I asked my orbs, I said, is that orb in there with you guys? And they're like, no. I said, well, can you get it the hell out? I mean, can you guys get it the hell out of here? Yeah. I mean, yeah, they did too, and it was gone. But it was the only time I've ever seen one in person that was creepy like that, right? The rest of them were, there wasn't a red one that I remember in my collect. There was of course, a blue. There was blue, gold, yellow, green, pink, purple, and a white one. And whitish silver one, actually. And then that rainbow one. The rainbow one was bigger than the other orbs by, you know, like 4 times. It was like the captainship of the Orbs, orb fleet. And it was a mixture of all those other colors, like swirling through it. So it was kind of different. But the different colors do mean... That's the one thing you'll pretty much get the straight truth on. Like, if you're looking up orbs and doing research on them, and you get the standard, stereotypical, the spiritual, and because there's usually 2 meanings behind the colors. There's a spiritual meaning and an energetic meaning. They are pretty right on. I mean, they are right on. I mean, so it's one thing that is not any kind of disinformation or anything that actually gets out there, is you can find out exactly what these orbs are if you are looking to, and if, you know, your mind isn't the type that just goes to a paranoid thought that it's, you know, they're coming to take you away, ha-ha, and all that bullshit, ho-ho, hee-hee. You can get the straight scoop on the orbs. There's different, you know, the blue ones are a calming, tranquil, kind of a very peaceful and mostly an angelic type of a colored orb, or that's what their color means. The yellow is like that too, but the yellow is sort of, okay, the yellow and the blue one are both very calming orbs, but the blue would be the one you would want when you would want to calm down to completely like relax for the day or night, right? If you were going to do that. You wouldn't want the blue one to calm you down if you had a bunch of shit to do that day. That would be the yellow one you would want in that case, right? Or if you wanted to really get some rest from home, you'd want the blue one instead of the yellow one. The yellow one's just a little more peppy. And their offspring color, the green orb, you know, well, the green orb, the green divine ray, all of it, it's all, you know, it's all the same frequency, right? Because light is just frequency. The green one is a healing color and a healing orb, and it has the perfect, when you know these orbs like I do in these colors, it's the perfect offspring that you would expect to come out of the blue and the yellow color. Yeah, it really, really is. Just like with purple, purple's a perfect offspring of the red, you know, the red passionate and the blue calming. They really are. I mean, these are mixtures of colors that make another color, and of course they're going to have properties of the other color, but these colors are all just frequency. That's all they are. It's more so, and I think even though the planet's getting brighter and it's going to become more gorgeous as it ascends, it'll be less about these colors visually and more so about, hearing these colors. You'll be able to be in tune with the frequency to be able to hear colors, right? And pick up light codes out of colors. Well, you'll see light codes in colors. You'll hear them coming from the colors. You'll feel them coming from the colors, right? Depending on what level of ascension you are as to where you jump to right away with how you get those light codes. Right, that's kind of what it is. And then the light codes, that kind of thing is kind of a bridge, I do believe, to telepathy. So that's where humanity is. Now, is this going to happen overnight? No. It's going to be a long time as far as Earth goes, Earth years go. It's not going to be tomorrow or next week, but comparatively, actually, it's not going to be long as far as Earth years go, but it's not going to be tomorrow or next week either. It takes a while. It really does. And what it really revolves around is the overall vibration of the collective of the entire planet, right? I mean, fuck. If you're into extraterrestrials and all that like I am, and you're a starseed and light worker, I mean, let me put it this way. If you woke up tomorrow morning and 3/4 of the people you knew, however many that might be, if 3/4 of the people you knew all of a sudden were into the same shit you were, right? All of a sudden, right? They were into it and totally down with it. The planet could pick up on such a high vibration that it might just completely, physically actually ascend. It would be vibrating that high, right? But it would take something on that monumental of a level, right? That's not feasible at once. I mean, over time, sure, but that to happen overnight, it would totally throw the planet into a tizzy. Having that many people do it, not in a bad way, but it would just be really, really radical to have happen. That's why when you see things going into other dimensions, you can't see them because when things go up into a higher dimension, you can't see them because they're vibrating at a higher rate. What does that mean? It means that they're vibrating at a faster rate, so fast that you can't really see them. Now you can see them kind of dart in and out of dimensions and fade, especially multidimensional beings fade in and out of dimensions. You're seeing that, right? Or they're moving in and out of various dimensions at once. But it gets going so fast. That's why it's important to work on yourself as far as picking up your vibration if, that's something you have a problem with. Because you have to be able to exist at that fast of a moving vibration. It moves really quick and it's loud. What I mean by loud, it's the loudest sound you'll never hear. A vibration is it's the loudest sound you'll never hear. I know that because also, too, when the planet was going through the shit it was going through after around 2012, really late 2011, and it really didn't let up completely till about the end of 2015. The planet was going through a lot of growing pains, a lot of really loud vibrating, where if people that weren't awake at all, they wouldn't fucking hear nothing. But man, if you were slightly awakened, you could hear shit. If you were up late at night, especially if it was late at night, the daytime wasn't that bad. But late at night, from probably, I don't know, like 11:30, midnight till, daybreak, really. And in the middle of that, the worst, it was really just loud. And I'd even have my neighbor, this kid Kyle, he was an Ultimate Fighter. I'm like, man, fuck, hey Kyle, you hearing this shit? He's like, no. Well, come over, man. And he came over, and I'm like, can you hear this? And he's like, no, I can't hear anything. And I'm like, yeah, well, but still, and then I had another friend of mine call me who lived down right on the bay, and he's like, man, did you hear that shit all night last night? I felt like Lionel Richie. It was all night long. I'm like, yeah, that's a song by Lionel Richie. And I'm like, yeah, man, no shit, it's every night. Every night. Yeah, I know. And then that same dude, about, I don't know, it was a couple months later, he went down to Southern California to watch, Palm Springs to watch his grandparents' condo that they went to Europe or some shit. And he called me one night from down there and said, hey, man, it's really loud. Can you tell tonight? It's really... I said, yeah, every goddamn night, brother. Every night, yeah, it's loud. And he's like, yeah, it's really... I said, well, yeah, you may be, 16 hours from home, but you're on the same coastline. Because we live up here on the Oregon coast. I mean, you're on the same coastline as you were up here. He's like, oh, yeah. But it was really loud hearing that. And I'll tell you another thing that was really fucking weird during that time. And I have not run into anybody else that's noticed this. I ran into somebody who said that they had heard it from somebody, but from about from about 2011 till about 2000, and that I noticed probably 16, early 16, late at night on the television. From about 11:30 at night is when it would start, right after the local news would end and the late night talk shows would start, until about, it stopped completely by about 6 a.m. And it wouldn't matter what was on, anything that was on, but if it was on the networks, it was really intense. The upper cable channels, not really much of it, you could tell. And it wouldn't matter whether you were getting these channels over rabbit ears, an antenna, or you had them on your cable, because every cable system you have access to those lower channels, to the, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, right? If you know anything about television, they're all in the lower channels, right? So it didn't matter whether they were on antenna or if it was over the cable you were getting them. The TV would move really kind of funny, just a slightness, and you would never be able, even if you were awake and you didn't notice, you might not even have noticed if I would have pointed it out to you. And then, but in the background too, on everything, commercials, there was all kinds of entities in there, all kinds of beings, trippy looking beings, right? Whether it was on the David Letterman show, his background with his window and all that shit, his fake window, and any of them, it wouldn't matter, an infomercial, whatever, and it would start right after about the local news was over at 11:30. The late local news for everywhere around the country, before they switched back to the network and, went to the late night shows, which was Letterman then. I think, I don't know who does them now. They all suck as far as I'm concerned. I don't really like TV, Johnny Carson was okay. He was the original to do that shit, but he's been gone since 1992. But yeah, there's so many of them now, I don't even know, But whether it was, Conan, or whether it was, I can't even think of any of them now, Seth Meyers, Kimmel, any of them. Any show like that would have that shit on there, on the lower channels. Some of them did, like CNN and Fox News and TBS and USA and all those ones that run the upper. They did a little, but it wasn't like it was with the networks down below on the lower channels. And like I said, it didn't make a difference whether you were getting those over the antenna for free or whether they were coming on cable. Same thing. It would do that, and it would just move so slightly. Dude, the TV would very slowly, very just ever so slightly, right? And all these faces would pop in and out of it. It was like their energies were it was so strong. The energies were just coming through everywhere. And I had, and then I didn't see any of that happen again until this last November. We had that month where it was like that. We hadn't had a month like that since 2015, where the energies got that strong, right? And now that month might have been as strong as any of those months back then, but the problem is it was only a month. I mean, from 2011 till early 16, late 15, about every other month there was a big, major, nasty shift that lasted a month that was really, intense. It wasn't just like, these energies now or whatever, which aren't anything, I don't think. But somebody who hasn't been awakened that long might think so I don't know. But they would, if they thought so, they'd have a hell of a time with those back then. I mean, I saw people practically start dropping like flies in the starseed community because of those symptoms then. They were nasty. But, yeah. So every time that we go through one of those shifts, we get an upgrade. As people that are awakened, we get an upgrade, right? So you get a download and you're able to handle what that does each time you go through one of those. That prepares you to exist in another rung up that dimensional ladder, right? So every dimension has several, I don't know how many rungs you'd want to say. We could use anything as an analogy, but several, right? So every time you step up that one rung, you're vibrating at a higher level easier. And that's what has to happen. That's why people, and I post so many of these in my Rainbow Orbs page and on other platforms, the vibrational sounds, the pinging in the air, the different the different hertz, whether it's the 442 or whatever it may be, the 369, 963, 8675309, Jenny for a good time call. Yeah, whatever it is, these things can help attune you, just like a tuning fork or a Tibetan singing bowl. These things the vibration, bells vibrating, listening to them intently, they can help pick up your vibration, right? So it's not so hard for you to handle when you're going through an ascension time where things are shifting into another rung. It's a lot easier to deal with. Yeah, so, and some of them are annoying. Some of them don't resonate with me. Some of them sound like I'm getting tinnitus in my ear when I listen. Some of them sound like somebody forgot to hang up the phone or the goddamn smoke alarm won't quit going off. But some of them are really resonating too as well. So, those are just little things you can do. There's a lot of solar flares coming to the planet right now. Every reliable channel is saying that, not just ones here and there, but it's true. With the solstice. And in the next coming months, after that, we're in uncharted waters as far as the planet's ascension process is going. The galaxies, really. So it's just onward and upward from here, I guess. But when they talk about a great split, nobody's leaving Earth. Although, might be a good idea. Only about 1.2 to 1.8% of the adult Western world population is awakened. Like would know what that I'm talking about. And I still don't think that's that bad. If it was 2%, that would actually be good. That would mean 1 in 50 people you meet know who the Pleiadians are or know who the Arcturians are. To me, I believe it's that number, but I'm still surprised it's that high. And some people are disappointed it's so low. But the thing is, it just shows there's a long way to go. But this is how far we've came to, though. I've got it calculated that there are probably around, I'm understanding that, people have dual platforms. They are on not just one social media platform. So I'm not going just by strictly numbers, but I've got to figure there's probably about 12 million starseeds that are on social media, about 12 million. Okay, probably in 2013 or so, there was probably 1.5 million to 2 million, really. So it's made leaps and bounds. Now, what we don't know, and I have no way to know this or gauge this unless I was to really do some intense studying, and I don't think it'd even be worth it to do, is to know how many, if there's 12 million that are on social media, how many of them are really out there then that don't have anything to do at all with social media. You know there's got to be a few, but it's just how many I wouldn't know. You'd have to take a percentage of the population and gauge it off, 12 million is how much of a percentage of people that are on social media, and then maybe, you would take, I don't know how you would do that then, but take people that aren't on there and see, so I don't have any idea how to gauge that, but there's a few, even if there was only a hand, 5, which, there's more than that, that's, there's still 12 million. Yeah, it's a hell of a start, right? And with each generation, there's going to be more and more and more and more and more. Hopefully, by the time this century here is over with, hopefully humanity will have been a couple of decades at the very least into having it just about completely figured out on how to do things completely the right way, right? That's not really that far off. It's 75 years in the span of anything. That's a blink of an eye. So, and I'm padding it when I say that. It could be a lot sooner than that, but I would say that if humanity is still around and not completely wiped out, by the time the century's over, things will be pretty good. By the time America's getting ready to settle, if there's such a thing as that kind of bullshit of, if we're not just one planet by then, if we're still a bunch of borders, when America starts to celebrate its tricentennial in 2076, maybe by then, but hopefully by then we'll have moved past the concept of these fucking individual countries instead of being just one planet. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, having all these borders. It makes sense for 2 weeks out of every 4 years when we have something called the Olympics there. Yeah, if they like it out here, there's a trade-off. They can have it for 2 weeks every 4 years. We can, bicker. But, yeah, those people over there, those people over here, when I'm over there, and, everybody's, it's us and them, us against them against us, right? And I don't quite understand that. It's really doesn't make any sense at all, but some people still think that way. A lot of people, in fact, think that way. That these people that are here, that are coming here, are coming to get them. They're they're a threat to their way of life. The thing about it is, right, what a bunch of bullshit for one, but two, if that were true, dude, if that kind of bullshit were true, there'd be a whole lot more of a fucking problem than we have now with anything. I mean, that we'd be having mass gang-style murders by these people, really. If it were like these people want to make it out to be. They're all paranoid about, somebody coming over here, or whatever. Or they're, somebody they know got killed by an illegal or whatever. Or I mean, but how many illegals are here that would take jobs that no white person would do? And the people that are talking about getting them out of here hire them anyway, though, here. So, I mean, yeah, it's really sad that somebody would use that. And so what? I mean, if that person wasn't over here, nothing would have happened to that person. Ever. That's what did it. And if we don't have illegals here, we won't have that happen. Well, then if we go that route, then if we don't have people that are, if we don't have people that are left-handed, they can't use their left hand to shoot somebody. I don't understand. The logic is really ridiculous. Because it really would be a fucking problem if it were as bad and doom and gloom as these people say that these people are that just want a better life, right? And come somewhere else. But the border thing, absolutely insane. Absolutely insane to have borders. I know. And then, of course, they want you to think that, they want you to get rid of borders because the one world... Yeah, the people that really don't want the one world government or the one world government, they don't want a one world government. They don't want a whole planet united. I mean, you can fuck over a country or a continent easily enough. Or a country, but in a continent is doable, but not a whole goddamn planet of people. It's too big, too vast, with nothing left to lose. Come on. So, they just don't want people to be, they want any possible barrier that could be up. And a lot of people get hung up on that. They claim to be a starseed, but then they claim that they want people deported at the same time, too, because it's the law or whatever. It's, it's the law. Right, but they know goddamn good and well they don't want them here. But, it's a good way to cover up, though, that, you're kind of the... that you're a bigot. It's a good way to deflect. So just like with every other country, Western country teaches their kids 2 languages when they are first coming up or close. Not too long after they start into school. But we don't here. I mean, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we automatically have been doing Spanish and English for decades now here? And what I don't get is these people that say, well, that would just give Spanish people the reason to not learn English and just use their language here. Yeah, but even that being fucking the case, why wouldn't you want your kid it would do nothing but help him or her to have that extra language as they move forward in their education and, in the world. And to those kind of people, competing for that kind of shit is very important. So you would think that they'd be like, fuck yeah, teach them another language. And then maybe a third one as they get into junior high. But no, it don't work that way, man. They don't, they'll think it'll give them a reason it'll give them a reason to think they can just not learn English or some shit. I mean, okay, well, either they're going to already or they're not going to already. So whatever. But then, your kid could learn a second language. And it's a lot easier to learn it. That's what I'm saying. It's a lot easier to learn it when you're that age. Yeah, I'd like to see people try to learn how to read if they didn't know how to by the time they were a preteen, right? Or in their early teens. For some, maybe. But I mean, after that, good fucking luck, man. Yeah, good luck. Your chances dramatically, in a matter of overnight, fall. Yeah, I don't understand it myself, but that's what it is. They just don't want, and I can tell it already. There'd be, if there were a big push to teach 2 different languages in American schools, in grammar school, there would be a big fucking bitch about it. That how dare the English? This is our first language. This is our language. This is what we should speak over here. Well, okay, fine, but you don't want your kid to learn another one. I mean, you don't have to start speaking fucking goddamn Cantonese at home every night. I mean, yeah, nobody's gonna do that to you. The accent and language police won't be stopping by. But that's the way it goes. And the extraterrestrials, another thing too, they don't get involved in politics. They know about it, of course. I mean, they know what goes on here and all that shit, of course. But they don't vibrate with it. I mean, it's not, to them, it's just people that we have been stupid enough to put in whatever party it is, or wherever country it is, just people that we've been stupid enough to put into power. Or that we have, that dark forces that we haven't had the brains to, foil their game yet. They manipulate, right? They know that kind of shit, but they're not into any kind of world leaders. Is there people that are undercover that work within different governments to probably help do the right thing? Of course, I'm sure. And not some, I don't think, big, huge fucking concerted effort, though. Like a lot of people like to think or say. I mean, I could, I'd love to be wrong, but I'm not. They're just not into that kind of thing. A politician, by definition of itself, it's not that any of them are bad, really. It's just that when you get to a level like that, you're owned and paid for already, and you have no choice. You or I would be, because you have so many different lobbyist groups, you have so many different campaign financiers that you have to scratch their back, and why shouldn't they expect something? They paid a shitload of money for your campaign. I mean, if they want that permit to build something somewhere that they've never been able to in the past, I mean, that's kind of the way 3D world works. See, when you understand the game, it makes a whole hell of a lot of difference that that's just how it is. And, if you're going to focus within it, that's the kind of shit you got to do. Right? They don't give this money out of the goodness of their heart. Oh, I'm just giving this money to the whoever, Senator so-and-so, because he's just a wonderful dude. There are people that do that, sure. But not when you're talking big money donations. No, man. People are going to want something out of it. Yeah, and it costs, and you can't, there's no way to get around it, though. You can't run a campaign without that kind of money. You have to have, if you're going to go speak places, you have to carry a staff with you of 100 people. I mean, and you think you don't? Yeah, think again. Think again if you think you don't. All the shit that has to be done and organized, and shit you wouldn't even dream to imagine at all, that has to be done, that you'd be screaming and hollering for in a day or two if it were you, because you need it. So it's a corrupt system of government anywhere you go. Whether it's fascism, communism, capitalism, socialism, all those isms would be wonderful if they were absent of a couple things. If they were absent of human greed and human lust for power. Yeah, if those things weren't really there at all those things would be okay. But then again, in a society like that, you wouldn't need to have those kind of labels. You just wouldn't need them, and people don't even know what they are anyway. Most people most people don't understand the definition of socialism and communism anyway. And then even the people that fucking do, they have the two of them backwards usually. What they think is socialism is communism. What they think of communism is socialism. Right? But either way, even then the regular way they thought about it wasn't even the right way. So it's, and fascism is what you get when you have tons and tons of corporate freedom, but no oversight. So no meat being regulated, no, none of that shit being looked at by citizens groups or anything. Just corporations allowed to run amok. Businesses, and not small businesses either. I'm talking about big corporate businesses just running amok with no government oversight at all. And the government is the people. You know what I mean? It's not. Those things have to be, until we live in a better society, we have to have controls and balances as far as, inspectors for certain shit, because you can't, you must be high on burlap if you think that these people are going to do it out of the goodness of their heart for these companies. They're going to do it out of the goodness of their caring heart. Come on. Really. It's yeah, and then the small business guy who's getting taxed to death and shit or whatever, he's getting, but his problem is he's too stupid to know who his real enemy is. He's bitching about the government, but he has no problem with, wealthier business people making a ton of money. That's where they want to go to. But so they're blaming, they ought to look at the tax breaks that those other people are getting that they're not getting. And you can blame the government all you want for that, but that's neither here nor there. Most of that shit is, and things that are affecting them in that kind of a way are usually laws that have been lobbied for and stipulations that have been lobbied for by bigger corporations because they don't like smaller entities and smaller businesses. So it's the way that it goes, people. But anyway, I appreciate it. Tomorrow we will be taking people that want to participate on the show. My co-host of the Conscious Conversations with Larry, it's getting late, with Carolyn and Larry, will be on at 9 a.m. Pacific time on TikTok. It'll be broadcast primarily through YouTube, through my YouTube channel, one of the 5, Pleiadian Express Productions /YouTube. It's actually the Larry Locken 1 channel at Pleiadian Express Productions /YouTube. And her and I have the Conscious Conversations show. It's usually every Thursday, but it wasn't this week. It'll be tomorrow, which is Friday, which is today now, at 9 a.m. on the West Coast, 11 o'clock where she's at in San Antonio, deep in the heart of Texas, where, everything's, the stars at night are big and bright, and the chiggers are, biting left and right. But we'll be talking about sensitivity. We're going to talk about sensitivity being the new cool, and that it's becoming more and more acceptable to be sensitive and to, be okay with being sensitive yourself, and knowing that that's not something you have to hide anymore or cover up. It's a masculine trait to be sensitive. It always has been a divine feminine trait, but it's a being sensitive is not anything that's wimpy, so to speak, like a lot of people might think. Oh, they're too sensitive, they're too, but see, people that talk that kind of nonsense and that kind of bullshit, right, they'd be the first ones to bitch if something happened to them. It's some little minute, and anything that would happen to them is nothing but a minute chicken shit, nothing of a thing, really, usually, right? But to them, it's 4 times worse than something major that, somebody's going through, that they would probably tell that person just to buck up. Yeah. Exactly. And if somebody's sensitive about everything, well, you know what? It hurt their feelings, man. It hurt their feelings, unless it's somebody just trying to be a jerkwad about it. But, that's really obvious to tell whether that's the case or not. And people, if somebody doesn't want you fucking with them, don't fuck with them, man. Comes around, goes around, kid. Anyway, this has been Rocken Larry Locken, and I will talk to you in a minute. Fuck. Really, man, wow. So TikTok didn't even record much. Yeah. Boy, 666 views. 666 views. Boy, that was a number I really wanted to end on. Oh, I should have kept going until somebody else came in. Okay, well, and I'm out of here. I'm outie 5,000 off of Facebook Live. How long was I going on here, man? No, man, I just thought I was off air. No.